And here's Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hey, I'm just going to let you know that we've got a bit of an unstable connection. So we're probably going to be bouncing in and out potentially. So you just keep going and we'll catch up to you from our end. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's the first lesson we've recorded that started with a phone call. That was new. Let me share my screen. Okay, just checking in. Are you seeing one slide or are you seeing two slides in my notes?
You see two slides.
You're seeing two.
Two and a note.
Now is that one?
One
All right, I feel like I'm at the optometrist. Which is better, one or two? Very good. Thank you very much. Chapter 4, Rejoice in the Lord Always. So we've been studying this Max Lucado book and kicked it off 3 weeks ago. And then Mark and Sean have continued, and we've got several more weeks to go. And this study came about because we started talking about fret and worry and being anxious. And that leads to this study. Max Lucado, pastor from the San Antonio area, just an incredible author, gives us so much to think through, to chew on. And we are going to look at, in the midst of all of our anxiousness and worry, why we should rejoice in the Lord always. So let's start it off with a quick question. Fill in the blank here. God uses blank to accomplish his will. What do you think the correct word is for the blank?
People.
Us.
Our screw ups.
Probably a good time to tell me that you're all on mute as you're simultaneously trying to provide the answer. There's lots of things that could go here. Like if we were playing Family Feud, this might be 100 answers up on the board. Can we identify one thing that might go in the blank?
There were several thrown out. Did you hear them?
The beard said people.
Is anybody talking or is it just me?
Yes, can you read lips?
Oh, there we go. All right. I just took myself off of mute, so that's good because I muted the computer when Mark called me. So I'm asking you questions. Nobody's responding. You are responding. It's just my problem. So got that fixed. Now let's answer the question. God uses blank to accomplish his will. I saw Bob talking. I saw David talking. What were those answers?
People.
People. There we go. There's one. What's else?
Bible. Bible.
Bible. Yep. There's a ton of choices here. All right. In the interest of time, I'm just going to help you out on this one. If there's 100 things that can go in this blank, maybe 200, 300, 10,000, we would say God uses everything to accomplish his will. He can choose to use what he wants to accomplish his will. Now, I'm curious if anybody knows what this word is. Anyone? And I'm going to give you a hint. If somebody in the audience has a medical background, you can probably help us out.
Apparently, a computer that I own.
Don't know.
Okay. And I don't know if anybody at the church there knows, but we're just going to continue on. So I actually did not know this word, but then I saw it and I read the definition. I was like, you know what? I probably studied this in 9th grade biology. And I had to listen to my computer pronounce it and hope I got it right. Amygdalae is how I heard it pronounced. And this is if you kind of think about like right here at your temples, you've got two little glands about the size of almonds, and they are your danger sensors. They are the thing that tell you that danger is imminent and you need to react. Now, they work so quickly that you don't have to make the decision on how to act. These are your instantaneous, something's wrong, hot stove, car's coming at me, whatever it is. Like, you don't think, wow, that car is going faster than I am. Wow, we're going to T-bone at this intersection. I should probably apply the brake, right? It's not that. This is a stop. You know, you have that danger moment. Now, in the midst of all these danger moments, you have a number of like alarm sensors that are going off in your head. Now, at your home, perhaps you have a home security system, or maybe your car has an alarm on it. How many times have you been in a parking lot, or maybe even sitting in a restaurant outside, you can hear a meep, 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 like somebody's alarm has gone off. And we just kind of get to the points like, you know what, nobody's car is getting broken into. Somebody just like parked too close to it. The wind blew it. Maybe maybe your house alarm goes off, and it's just because your dog is running around in the house. I remember the first school that I was teaching in, we weren't allowed to hang anything from the ceiling, which I remembered as a kid, like all sorts of art was hung from the ceiling, all sorts of other things. And the reason was the air conditioners would blow on the weekends and it would set off the alarms because we had papers hanging up in the art room, whatever it might be. So lots and lots of things are false alarms. Now, there are things that are real emergencies. And when we're in a dangerous situation, we should respond. But we need to know the difference between what is a real threat and what is not a threat. So let's unpack that just a little bit more. And we'll think about that our perpetual anxiety is the mental alarm system that never quite turns off. So think about this. When an alarm on a car goes off and you're sitting there at a restaurant, you're dining al fresco at 131 Main, and it's like, ring, ring, and all you can think about is, would somebody recognize it's their car, get outside and turn it off? Or you hear your neighbor's alarm start to go off. You're like, how quickly can we get that out of the way? Well, if it's in a real emergency, we want that alarm to alert people, and we want the police to come. We want things to happen. But in our own mind, this anxiety that's just kind of right, we need a way to turn that off. So it's this anxiety that people have. It's like those glands in our brain with an itchy trigger finger. They go off in times that are not real emergencies. So one of the things that we need to do is to find ways to limit our anxiety. We don't have to live in this state of high alert. Something is happening. Something is happening. I told you about my dad, that he lives in this way. He called me yesterday and was all upset because he had an Amazon package that he had ordered that never arrived. He contacted Amazon, got a refund, and then Friday night, the package was delivered. And he was all anxious about it because now he didn't know what to do because he has the package and he has a refund. And so he's like, how do I call? I need to call Amazon. I need to email them. Like, this is wrong. Dad, don't worry about it. Amazon's not going to care. They're going to tell you to keep your money and keep the package. I mean, it's a little bit of wood stain. It was a $4 bottle of wood stain. And he's all worked up about it. Well, we don't have to live on the state of high alert. Most of the things that we're worried about, that we're fretting about, we can just let them go by the wayside. So two chemicals in your brain are part of this story. One of them is dopamine and one of them is serotonin. Now, dopamine, we know, is that joy sensor in the brain. When you've got that happy moment, it's like this dopamine is just rushing into you. This is why that I made the comment at the very beginning that every 10 minutes we should get up and change seats. Because dopamine gets triggered with all different, there we go, David and Karen, I got to switch again. Dopamine is this little trigger when you see a cartoon or somebody tells you a joke or you see a friend, you get a hug. All these things release dopamine in your brain. And as somebody who presents a lot, one of the things that we learn in presentation skills is that you should completely switch up what you're doing. You need to tell a story, show a cartoon, have people do something active, at least every 10 minutes, respond to a question, because that releases the dopamine. So for people whose brains have kind of wandered off, it brings them back into the story. Not because you've given them alert like, hey, pay attention here. No, it's just because you've triggered the dopamine. Now, serotonin works the other way. Serotonin is the chemical in your brain that says, relax. It's okay. It's time to come down. Bring yourself down before bed. This is why some people take different types of medications to relax themselves before bed. It's the serotonin that helps them just to calm down. So dopamine and serotonin do two things. They restore our joy and they restore our peace. But if our brain is on high alert all the time, these two natural God-given chemicals can't work because they're completely blocked off. So we need God to help us to calm our brain so that we don't live in this constant state of danger. Now in Philippians, and we heard this verse a couple of weeks ago, it says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. This is Philippians 4:4. Now, when we look at this, think about this for just a minute. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. So what days are we talking about here? Payday, that's a good day to rejoice. A birthday, maybe you're going to go on a vacation day. You've got a really good, like you went out and you had a run, you had a really good day. You had something special scheduled with a friend and you got to go to lunch, whatever it might be. Okay, these days are easy to rejoice in the Lord, right? You're excited about them. You're anticipating them. But wait, what's that word there? Always. Does that mean if I'm in the hospital? What if I'm standing in an unemployment line? What if I'm a mom and my baby was just born with a disability? Should I rejoice in the Lord always? The answer is yes. And we need to be thinking about rejoicing in the Lord always on the days when it's easy and the times when it just doesn't feel so easy at all. And so part of that leads us to our Bible character that we're going to talk a little bit about today. And this is Joseph. Now, this is one of my favorite things. Now, one of the things you haven't learned about me yet is I just love Broadway. I think it is super fun. And I love to go to the shows and enjoy the music before the show, after the show. And one of my favorites is Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now, when I was preparing the lesson, I was listening to the soundtrack to this. Catherine walked into my office and she's like, what is going on in here? Because this is not normal. Normally, if I'm listening to this kind of music, like I'm in the car by myself or I've got my headphones in, like if we're just hanging out at the house, I'm not usually listening to Broadway. But I love the story of Joseph. And if you've not had a chance either to watch this either on one of your favorite streaming sessions or if seen it in live theater or whatever, we could go back to that. I highly recommend Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Now, I won't say that it is 100% biblically accurate, but the story it captures very, very well. Let's look at a couple of things that happen in the story. First, Joseph didn't have any friends. He was all alone, like Paul, who we talked about last week or the week before. He's in jail. Joseph is also in jail. Now, why is Joseph in jail? We're going to find that out in just a moment. But he's got a couple of inmates with him. One of them is the cupbearer for the king, and the other is a baker. And these two, both working in the palace, had things that happened to them. They're both thrown in jail. And they had dreams, and they asked Joseph to help interpret their two dreams. and Joseph does. One of those dreams from the cupbearer ends up being a very good dream. And the one from the baker ends up being a very bad dream. And the cupbearer's dream, Joseph says, you're going to be restored fully to the king. And the baker's dream, he said, you know what? Your days are numbered. You're going to be executed soon. Can you just imagine being in a cell with inmates and telling one of them, hey, you're about to get out, and the other one, like, you're about to, get cut? What a crazy moment this was. But God has Joseph in a really interesting position on purpose. So what's happened? How did he even get in jail in the first place? Well, his brothers sold him. There were 12 brothers, and Joseph was the favorite. And the brothers did not like that. So being one of the youngest, they were like, we should kill him. But instead, they were like, wait a minute, we can make some money. So they sell him to a traveling market. And he goes off and he's in the traveling market. Now, you might think if you're a father and there's 12 sons and one of them is your favorite, and all of a sudden that son is missing, you would think as a father, you're going to go looking. Well, he doesn't really go looking. He asks a few questions, and that's about it. So we could consider that his father was even absent in the story. Once he gets to Egypt, we find out that he's gained favor, and he's spending some time working with Potiphar in the palace. And then Potiphar's wife takes a fancy to him and tries to seduce him. Well, in this story, what ends up happening is David resists, and then Potiphar's wife takes his coat to frame him. And so in all of this, he gets falsely accused of attempted rape, and he's back into prison. So now we've got him into prison, and he's hopeful. He interprets these dreams we talked about, and he tells the cupbearer, he said, when you get released and you go to see the king, put in a good word for me so that I can get out, because I didn't do it. Do you catch all this? All these negative things are happening to him. And Joseph, poor Joseph, all these things are happening. And you might be asking, where's God in all of this? Why would God allow somebody who's got such favor have all these negative things happen to him? Well, one of the things that we know is that we ask this question a lot. All of a sudden, Alcoholics Anonymous is part of our family. All of a sudden, we're in a women's shelter. Our spouse departs, or maybe we have a pause in our employment. And we ask, where's God in all this? Well, we know that Christianity says, yes, there is a God. Now, other faiths don't say this. And this God is personally and powerfully involved in his creation. This is really, really important. When we are anxious, when we are fretting, we have to remember that God is in control and he is wrapped around us. Even at the times like Joseph, where we feel like it's just not going well for me. So let's look at a couple of scriptures that are going to help us understand how God takes all these circumstances and leads us to not to fret, but to rejoice in the Lord always. So we know that we shouldn't fret. It only causes harm in our life. Hebrews 1:3 says, he is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power. Did you catch that? He upholds the universe by the word of his power. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Did you catch that? He's in control. He upholds the universe, and now he sits at the right hand of God. What a seat of power, what a seat of control. In that seat, he's directing his creation, even at the times when we feel like, hey, maybe that's not what's happening. Now, if you happen to be an English major out there, you might catch one thing in this verse, that when he is sustaining all things, that if we go back to the Greek, it is what's called a present participle. And a present participle implies that Jesus is continually doing these things in the present. So it's not I sit at the right hand of God the Father and I did this once. It's I'm constantly there in your life and I am exercising supremacy in all things. He is 100% active in each and every one of our lives. And we have 3 verses that are going to support this conversation. So let's take a look at them. So Colossians 1:17, Acts 17:28, and Ephesians 1:11. Now, all 3 of these are short, but if you focus for just a moment on all 3, remember, we're building the case that God is in control. Listen to these 3. Colossians 1:17, as he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. Does that say control? I'm giving that one 2 thumbs up. Let's see what we think about the next one. Acts 17:28, another short one. For in him we live and move and have our being. Even as some of your own poets have said, for indeed we are his offspring. In God we live and move. Everything we do is inside of God. He's in control. And then Ephesians 1:11, Paul says, in him we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the purpose of him, who works all things to the counsel of his will. And that, my friends, that is saying God is in control. Now, what does this look like in my head? This looks like this. Now, the orchestration that's happening, the conductor, I see God as like this conductor of all these things. Now, could we have all these people out there with their instruments ready to play and no conductor? Could that happen? I see one person shaking their head. Thank you. Could it be that we could just send a few pieces of music, a few musicians out there with instruments? Yes. But the only way you get the symphony as it was intended is when you put the conductor, and everybody's focus is on the conductor, recognizing that the conductor is leading in all things. And that's a great way to me to think about God. He causes all these things to happen. Psalm 104. Yep, David, go ahead.
When you
You're
said
muted, aren't you?
when you said that, what went through my mind, and I had to think even more about this later, and maybe I'm premature saying it, but when I'm thinking about that, because I played in an orchestra and band for a number of years, and before we came to play, I understand exactly what you say, totally agree, that basically the conductor is leading all the people in the kingdom in the orchestra to make beautiful music. But before doing that, it was my responsibility to be tuned up, to be in key, to practice and be prepared so that the conductor could use my talents to the best of my ability to make better music. And that's what went through my mind when you started using that analogy.
Yeah, 100%. Now, one of the things we know about the conductor is if you're going to be a conductor, you know how to play nearly all of those instruments. And it's my sister was a music teacher. And so she had to learn, I can't remember for graduation. I think she learned I don't know, 15 or 20 instruments that she had to be able to play at some level, not because she needed to play the instrument, but because she needed to know enough so that she could conduct. And, to your point, David, we're getting tuned up. We're getting ready. We are seated at God's feet looking for what should our moves be. Direct us. Great comment. Appreciate that. Psalm 104, 14 and 15 suggests that God is indeed the conductor. David writes in the Psalms, "You cause the grass to grow for the livestock and plants for man to cultivate, and he may bring forth food from the earth, that he may bring forth food from the earth, and wine to gladden the heart of man, oil to make his face shine, and bread to strengthen man's heart." So God rules, God sets, and God executes. And all these suggest that he is a heavenly architect, and that each of you are part of his blueprint. Now, some of you work in occupations where you need blueprints. And I am curious if somebody would weigh in here on what is the importance of the blueprint.
Mark, I worked in construction even as an
Okay.
admin. So I looked at plans and stuff before. So I'm not exactly sure about the blueprint part of it, but like when you're looking at, it reminds me of a plan. So when you're looking at the plans, you got to know the plans of the house before you go and start building it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Yep.
that makes me think of. So again, even with you, I love the conductor orchestra thing too, because again, I think it, like David said, I think it's like you have to be ready, you have to be prepared before going to build it. We have to be ready and prepared coming into church, worshiping God with our fellow believers and listening to our pastor preach God's word, coming into Bible study like this, to be able to read our book, to be able to be prepared to go out into the world.
That's right. Thanks,
That's
Donna.
what I'm thinking.
Good. And we need a blueprint, even if we go in and we want to make some modifications to an existing structure. One of the things they're going to come in and ask is like, do you have the original blueprints? Like, can we start working off of those? Otherwise, you've got kind of a crazy fishing expedition to try and figure out, where some of the wire chases, how did they run the plumbing, all these different kinds of things. And now, when you first saw this, I mentioned, hey, some of you are in construction, others of you are in other occupations, and you still have a blueprint. It may not look like this, but you have a roadmap, you have a plan, you know where the company, the organization are going. And God is the heavenly architect, and we are part of that blueprint, which leads to a really important question. All right, if God's in charge, why is Joseph in prison? Anybody wonder that? Such an upstanding character in the Bible. Joseph is a fascinating study to me. Why is he in prison? Yeah.
Part of the plan to go forward with what he wants to accomplish.
That's 100% right, Karen. God knew that God knew that Joseph would end up in prison long before Joseph was ever born. He knew that was part of the plan, because it was only through him being in prison as being part of his higher purpose that we get to the point that it's all a celebration. Because he ends up back, essentially, he becomes in charge of the kingdom, running the day-to-day affairs for the king. And when he does this, it's such a beautiful tapestry of what God has done, showing that through all the hardship, God had a plan, God was in control, and leads, as we see in one of these pieces of the story, that Joseph's coat of many colors becomes an absolute testament to God's power. One of the things that Joseph says to his brothers when they come back, begging for him to help them, because there's famine all across the land. Because Joseph ends up, because he's such a great at interpreting dreams, not just for the cupbearer and not just for the baker, but even for the king's dreams that he can't interpret. And he tells them, you're going to go through 7 years of plenty. There's 7 fat cows in his dream. And then 7 scrawny cows come out of the Nile and begin to eat the healthy cows. And he interprets that to say that your 7 years of plenty across the land are going to become 7 years of famine. And so he sets the plan to make sure that they're going to make it through the 7 years. So they build grain silos, do all sorts of things to set them up. And his brothers come back begging. And he doesn't say to him, hey, I'm not going to help you. But what we find in Genesis 50 is he says to his brothers, you intended to harm me. Remember, they made his dad think he was gone for dead. They went and they sold him off to the merchants. But God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many of lives, because they've worked it through the famine. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children, because they come by and they literally fall on their knees in front of him, begging for help. Now, we're going to look at this verse in 2 words. Take a peek at what we see here. But God is a really important part of this verse. You intended to harm me, but God. What was intended as harm was for good. God had a plan because Joseph kept God in the middle of his circumstances. So whatever it is out there that you're battling with, anxiety or fret or fear, you should go into that with your own sword. And imagine your sword has "but God" emblazoned right there. And that "but God" is helping you to battle through whatever it is. And as you think through that, the etching of "but God," we have so many stories we could tell about I was ... but God. In his higher purpose, he knew that Jesus was going to the cross. He knew he would raise from the dead. He knows what's happening to you, and he can reverse where you are. You might feel like you're in Egypt right now, just like Joseph was. Sent off away from your homeland, away from the places where you know your family. You just feel isolated. Maybe you feel like you're literally in jail. But God has a plan, regardless of where you are right now, regardless of how you feel, regardless of circumstances. And the story of Joseph teaches us to lean into God's plan, which is exactly what he did. Romans 8:28 tells us that we know that all things work together for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And that's us. So I want to give you an image and a quick video that will illustrate this. And it comes to us from Brussels, Belgium. Has anybody been to Brussels and seen this activity? Okay, so this is lace making, and I could tell you all about lace making, but the best thing I can do is to play a 2-minute video for you, and I hope this comes across cleanly because it clearly tells us the story of what God is doing. Take a peek.
Cheryl, she's really fast. What do you think, honey? Directions.
Con il gusto nell'opone.
Now that would cause me anxiety.
Well, that wasn't the point of that particular story, but that's funny. So when you see that, and if you saw the piece at the very beginning that says it takes about 2 hours to make 1 square inch of lace, and that was a demonstration. But if you read a little deeper into the story of the lace making, when you go to see the demo, it looks like that. They're out, you can see them. But when they're really doing their craft, they're in a dark room and just a small light is right on the lace of where they're doing their work. And that to me is just a chilling picture of what God does, because sometimes you feel like you are just in the dark and you can't see where God is working in your life, but he's there. He is manipulating and moving things according to his purpose so that the lace that is you in your life turns into something absolutely intricate and beautiful. It all comes together. And I take you back to this picture from the first week, from the story, The Monster Under the Bed. Whatever it is that's keeping you up at night, when that little light is shining through the window, that light is God. And just like the looms and the weavers that are creating that intricate lace, he has your back. And I closed that first week with the same comment I made for this week, that we should rejoice in the Lord always. And when we do that, God says to us, everything is secure. You can rest now. And when we remember that's the way that God has intricately built us into his united plan, his kingdom, and God is the conductor. We are in exactly the right place at the right time to rest in him. Comments or questions?
Thank you for those analogies, because that really helped me a lot. I'm very visual and hands-on when I'm learning, but to describe it in that way really helps me visualize what you mean. So thank you for that.
Sure thing, Donna.
Hey, Mark,
Yes, Joe.
have I forget what verse it was, Philippians, in all things, be thankful and praise him. My mother, I was born and raised in a Christian household, and my mother used to tell me that, especially as a teenager, I thought she was insane. I'd tell her, or she would know that something was going bad in my life, and she'd say, Joey, you just praise God no matter what. And I'd be like, that is just stupid. That is just insane. Why am I going to praise him? The Bible says that's what we should do. And you just praise. Anyway, I thought she was insane. I really did. But I know better. I know better now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if we had time, we would dig into the why you know better, because that's an important part of that.
Yeah.
Some of that is, you've had experiences, and some of that is, you've learned across time. There may be others, but those are the first two things that come to my mind.
This reminds me when I was watching the modern service, and by the way, the sermon was great, the music was great, the atmosphere was great, or whatever. And I know that over the last year or two, we've gone through a lot, and we're going to go through a lot. But this reminds me that when I was watching the service this morning, I just had this great warm sensation that Bethel is right on the verge of doing more and more great things. It's coming together. And I think back conversations I had with a lot of people in this room over the last year of the anxiety about the way things are going. And it was the timing was not right. And it's back then that God was like, all right, just hang on, I got a plan. And I see so many great things with people that have come into the church. One being Mark B. and Catherine, and your lessons. It's all fitting into this orchestra that is Bethel Church, and I feel great about it.
That's great. Thanks, David. All right.
Comment, Mark.
Yes. Yeah.
So you were talking about the orchestra and God being the conductor. I guess I see things in chaos more than I see them working in harmony. And so I couldn't help but when you were talking about it, thinking of what God's trying to do as the conductor, and he sees people with talent and that he's put in position to do things, to play a certain instrument for his music, and they choose to not be engaged or whatever, but he's constantly got somebody else that steps into that third seat, for the violin, for the violin or the bass or whatever. But just trying to manage the chaos, and yet obviously his plan's been carried out up to this point. So
yeah, it's a great point, Joel. Yeah, that
visual of the sword, but God. I think I'm gonna be carrying that sword with me from now on.
that's good. I like that. No. All right. Well, thank y'all for your comments. Those are I love to hear kind of how you took things through the teaching, and it doesn't matter which one of us are teaching, but knowing what you take away and how you begin to apply, what God puts in front of us is really great. And when we articulate these things, it's kind of our, speaking out loud to others and continuing to encourage others around us with how we're going to take this going forward. So let's close this up in prayer. God, we thank you for this lesson. We thank you for our church. And I'm reminded this morning in modern worship, we sang in the opening song that when darkness seems to hide his face, and that to me is what we're talking about when we're anxious and we're fretful, that it seems like you're not there. Help us to always remember that you are there, that you are the great orchestrator, that you have a plan, and it is your light on us that is your workmanship. And we are thankful that we are in a place, and in a place of faith, that we can be the clay in your hands. Help us to fret less, help us to worry less, and help us to always rest in you because you've got this. Amen.
Next week, Sean Niner is going to be leading us in chapter 5, which is contagious calm. So I've got a request that everyone put Sean on their prayer list this week to open his heart and mind to what he's going to be leading us next week. I'm sure he would appreciate that.
One more thing from me real quick. The whole but God thing kind of takes me back to the Bible study that the women did before. We had that same thing come up. The whole but God thing. But I've got I still have a plan. It came up in the last study, and one of the things I'm hearing, I tried to share with a friend before, is that if you hear it at least 2 or 3 times, whether it be in Sunday school, whether it be from a Bible study or from a pastor or even from a Christian friend, you hear it more than once. I was like, okay, God, I know that was you.
Yeah. That's a great point. Sometimes you just need to hear it at the right moment. Maybe you've heard it 3 or 4 times, but you need to hear it in that moment. You know, like that's kind of like go back to Joe Roy's comment, right? Your mom says it to you over and over and over again. And finally, one time it clicks, and maybe mom's not right there when it happens.
Mm-hmm. But he still had that reminder of her saying that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
All right, friends, it is 12 o'clock. It is time to head on the rest of your week. I wish you all just a fantastic week and fret less.
Thanks. Good to see everybody.
Mark.
Yeah, red button. Thank you.
Which one?
Mark B.
Yes, sir.
I was noticing, all right, we see that we got Mark Ariels there, which was the church thing. What I'm wondering, I'll talk to Jeremy, I'm wondering if the signal at the church, the Wi-Fi at the church needs to have a booster so that, I know when we were experimenting with about a week or so ago, he said, go to Wilson Knott's classroom. He said, the Wi-Fi does not have a good signal down there. So I'm wondering if we have a weak signal in the activity center. And I want to ask him about that. The other thing I noticed is that Angie Mady also clicked in with her phone. And so we
gave us 2 views.
We actually had 2 views of the Sunday school class, which I thought was great because the parents
I agree.
had that without having the audio. So that I think that worked out good for the people that are coming online and stuff like that. So I figured it's easier to explain that versus, and I'll be sending a text message to Mark A and you and well to Jeremy, and I'll copy y'all in on there to ask those questions to make it just a little bit better. But
yeah, I mean, there's lots of different reasons that the Wi-Fi could be stronger or weaker. It's also possible that just where it is with the construction, you know, lots of concrete, metal, all those kinds of things mess up Wi-Fi. They may need to hardwire it in there.
yes.
What I don't know and what we need to ask is, what was the reception like for them? For me, most of the time it was clear after we went through that initial part. Did it stay clear for y'all for the whole time?
For us, it did.
Yeah. So it's just gonna be a question of for them because
Wondered if they were trying to make more comments, but we didn't hear maybe if
Yeah.
they were or weren't. I was just curious. I don't know.
yeah, I don't know either. And
Over the next 2
Yeah,
weeks, it's going to be different because Sean, I know, will be teaching from that class, from the classroom, and I teach the following week, and I'll be teaching from the classroom. And when we experimented with the camera, which was a good camera, and actually we're using the microphone in the camera when we experimented before. So next week will be a teacher in the classroom, which will be a different dynamic also. So we'll get there.
yeah, and we hope to get back in person by the time I think by the time we get to July, we'll be back in person because we still have. I have my second shot on Thursday, and then 2 weeks past that, and then starting Memorial Day through the end of June, we are just lacrosse. I mean, it's just constant.
But in that point, except for game times or whatever, you'll be, you might be online doing it depending on the time of the game or the schedule.
Right.
And the other thing is the fact that we're recording it each week. We'll have to do Zoom so that the class can be recorded. So someone.
Oh, we're still recording right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I did the same thing last week.
You're gonna stop the recording.